where Moore's law of the capacity of chips is exponentially growing. It is a pleasure to see a young crop of thinkers, students, who are going to be the practitioners of this new emerging world of technology and determining the shape to a large extent of this emerging media ecology. Media must today be looked upon as ecological as the oxygen we breathe or the pollution we encounter, because we live with media. And when I say media, it's not just the formal media that you understand by newspaper or television or radio or audio or video, but language and literature constitute the media. Technology, though, as Heidegger famously said, the essence of technology is not technology. The essence of technology is what difference it makes to humanity, to your life, the lives of people around you. How does it enrich your life? How does it make you intellectually more exciting? How does it widen your mental horizons? How does it enable you to contextualize events and happenings around you? And we are, in a sense, living in very exciting times, because there are so many things that are happening around us, much of it which may not be palatable to us, much of it may be great, but exciting nevertheless. And therefore, the context of this national seminar and the choice of the subject, I think I'd like to compliment those who thought of the subject, because it is the key to our, not understanding, it's difficult to understand, key to exploring this frontier area of the intersection of technology, literature, communication. We must be prepared. Thomas Paine famously said, Thomas Paine is one of the fathers of the American freedom movement, American War of Independence, and his tract, I call it a book, called Common Sense, played a very big role in inspiring the founding fathers of the American Republic. He says, and I quote, "A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right, and raises at first a formidable outcry in defense of custom. But the tumult soon subsides. Time makes more converts than reason." In other words, we may be used to an idea of something being something for such a long time that we don't bother to interrogate whether that is any more what we thought it is. So we are at a time where the changes that are taking place around us are so radical, so vast, so definitive, that we have to rethink a lot of things we took for granted. One of them, I'm going to argue, is our understanding of the written word. When we say literature, we often speak about the written word. But written word is not necessarily primary or anterior to human thought than the spoken word, for instance. When in the Bible it says in the beginning was the word, was it referring to the written word or the spoken word? In literature, when you say figures of speech, why would you use the metaphor of speech to define grammar and syntax of the written form? Talk about figure of speech as literature students. So the spoken word came before the written word. The written word was a means of capturing the imagination and putting it on paper, if you like. Of course, the written word goes back to the dawn of civilization, even in the Sumerian civilization, which is 5,000 years before the Christian era, BC as we call it. There was a written word because the Sumerian text, when the civilization was discovered, there was this credo, this saying, that which is not recorded does not exist. So that is the power of the written word. Written word provides authority, provides existence to thought. Otherwise, it remains a private affair, right? So, but before the written word was a spoken word. And one of the things that technology of the last 2 decades, if you like, or 3 decades at best, has done is to retrieve the lost importance of the spoken word. Which is why today we speak in terms of multimedia. We speak of convergence of text, of visual, of audio. This multimedia convergence is what is happening before us. When you use your mobile phone or your smartphone, you're actually practicing multimedia. You text messages, you see reels on it, you hear your podcast on it, you speak into it, you communicate in that form. So the writtenness is becoming more for the spokenness. So you need to reimagine, since that is an important part of the theme, the idea of the written and the spoken, and examine these terms in the current context. It was in the 17th century that the idea of, say, journalism emerged in England because of the rise of capitalism, because of technology, because of the Gutenberg press in the 15th century, the impact it was having, because of the Protestant Revolution, because there was Bible reading on a mass scale. Bibles were printed on a mass scale because the idea was that I can read the Bible and understand my God. And then soon after that, in about 50 years' time, there was the Catholic Counter-Reformation, which also led to a splurge, that was a surge of printing and reading. And that's the first mass action of reading that you see in history, human history. Before that, of course, it was there, but in niches, in privileged niches perhaps, or in, like you see it in the name of the rose, in cloistered abbeys where priests were, for example, used to carry out a lot of writing, putting things down on huge folios. But this shift takes place and people begin to understand and put their express themselves on paper. Now, already I think, the idea of a paper and using a pen or a pencil to write on it is becoming obsolete because you're using your keyboard most of what you do. Whether it's on your laptop or on a desktop or your mobile phone, there's been a change in the whole practice. And already, because of artificial intelligence, you arrive at a technological, there is facilitation where you can speak into your phone and that will be converted into text. And you can send that. You don't need to actually key it. So in other words, the spokenness of language, which had been supervened, which had been overwhelmed by the written form for hundreds of years, is now being rediscovered and retrieved because the technology enables that. And yet you know that implicitly the spoken was important. As I said, the idea that you talk about great writing and grammar in terms of figures of speech, because it is speech that is important. But technology enables that. Technology already enabled the idea of the visual becoming very strong. With the arrival of cinema, then of television, and then of shooting even on your mobile phone. Now, everyone is a cinematographer, if you like, in the you know. When I started my career in television, you could not shoot with a camera. You were not even allowed to look through the lens, because that was a privilege only the cameraman had. And you had to prove that you were good enough to start doing that and calling the shots, asking for this shot or that shot, or this angle or this lens, and so on. All that is gone. All of us are used to the idea of the frame. We're used to the idea of taking pictures, mobile pictures. And subconsciously, we start weighing the idea of whether it's against light, with light, profiles, close up. You are getting the grammar of the visual internalized in, particularly the younger generation, because you're all digital natives. You're born into this technology. This mobile phone is like an extension of your arm. It's like a prosthetic extension, if you like, of your arm. So you use it without being conscious of it. You use it like like you do any other aspect of your life. So there's a big shift in the way this technology is determining your generation and has determined my generation. You are privileged, you're uniquely privileged historically, because you are digital natives and you have the intuitive understanding of this technology, which I don't have, and which I have to make an effort to understand on the terms. So that is why Heidegger said the essence of technology is not technological, it is what you do with it. So you are already using the visual art in terms of cinematic art, the audio, or I mean the video visual art, using the textual form, you're using the sound, because podcasts, you can do podcasts. And you're combining all of these. And so the primacy of the written word has been challenged, and we have co-equal situation, where the written, the visual, the audio are more or less one part. And they interact with each other. And the one supplements the other, feeds into the other, enriches the other. The one provides, shall we say, nuances to the other. So these are things, if you get conscious about, you will start looking at the way you use your mobile phone more intelligently, more consciously, more productively, more creatively. Because that is great media practice. The other thing that technology has done is it's ushered us into a world where all of us are media practitioners. Because the moment you use a mobile phone, you're a media practitioner. It's not a silo, it's not a formal, strange area of activity. Of course, there are specialists who will be great cinematographers, or directors, or script writers, or creative writers who write novels and so on. I would think that the novel of the future, the literary novel of the future, will be a multimedia novel, where I'm writing part of it, and then some of the aspects that I can't write, cannot express in writing, will come alive in visual, or in form of some sound effect, or in terms of explanation. And yet writing has its peculiar advantages. When you're shooting on the visual, you have to show. You can do nuances there. You can have grays instead of black and white. You can have ideas which come because of the way you juxtapose shots. The idea of montage, for instance, which Eisenstein was famous for, and you could see this Battleship Potemkin, you'll find this Odessa step sequence that is seen as the height of the idea of montage, whereby putting two shots together, you get not the sum of its parts, but the product of its parts. There's a kind of giant leap, there's a kind of quantum leap. So when you put a shot of a woman's cradle with a baby in it slipping from her hand and it comes down your Odessa steps, and you cut to the shot of a lion meaning a statue of a lion, or a sculpture of a lion, and some other forms. the overall impact it has, it's a directed kind of, that's direction in terms of cutting. So that's called montage. Montage is a specialized term. It's not collage. Collage is very stick and paste various things on material, and it's collage. So there are terms like that which will emerge, which are peculiar to the new media. Already the principal spoke about the idea of immersiveness. So it's a very intangible idea at one level, but very tangible when you use all these forms. That is, you see, you read, you hear, and there is a fourth element, which is it pulls your heartstrings. There's an emotional investment. Can you engage? Can you emotionally engage? Subtly or not so subtly, your reader, your viewer, unfortunately the term which combines reader, viewer and all of that is consumer, which is not the appropriate word because consumerism suggests market and commercialization. The practitioner, so the recipient, shall we say, the beneficiary of the media. So that is what convergence is doing to technology. When we move from the industrial era to the information era, you probably read about the industrial revolution and the industrial age. Because the industrial revolution and the industrial age was marked by factories, assembly line production, which is caricatured brilliantly, in Modern Times by Charlie Chaplin, the movie called, where you see him fixing nuts and bolts on an assembly line, and he's become so automatic and so robotic that he starts fixing people's noses and so on. So that was the idea of assembly line production, specialized areas. One person just fixes a bolt, another person just turns a nut, third person just adds the elements. That's how the industrial revolution at its height was characterized. And representing the industrial revolution at its height was the car factory of Henry Ford in Detroit. That car came only in what's called the T model car, which was always in black and always had a particular shape. There was no choice there. It was a seller's market. And Ford was credited with the famous saying, everybody can have a car of any color that he likes as long as it is black. In other words, there was only notional choice. It was standardized. So industrial revolution brought the idea of standardization, homogenization, look alike. Today you find the market standardization and homogenization is very strong. But when you shift it to the information and communication revolution, what's called the ICT revolution, information and communication technology revolution, there has been a shift not just in terms of technology. First of all, you move from big factories and floors and brick and mortar into chips, from brawn to brain, if you like. It's not the power, it's not the physical power that you leverage, it's a mental power. From blue collar workers, you move to white collar workers. You'll find a shift taking place. And there's a paradigm shift, if you like, a paradigm shift taking place when you move from the Industrial Revolution to the Information Revolution. And the big shift that takes place is not just in terms of technology. Technologically, there's a huge shift. But as Heidegger said, the essence of technology is not technological. What this technology does to your power of understanding, to your cognition, to how you see things. One big shift that has taken place, and I'd like you to think about this, is that we have moved from a value system, from a world which privileged height and depth, the idea of height and depth. We had this association, automatic association of something being high and something being deep. Depth was associated with profundity, with gravity, with importance, height also. Whereas breadth was seen as not so important. We see in the information revolution era, the idea of breadth becomes as important, if not more important, than height and depth. Examine the language of the new media, let's say the internet, for instance. You talk about surfing the net. You don't talk about diving into depths of knowledge in the text or ascending to heights of knowledge surfing, scanning, spamming. The terminology, the jargon is all about breadth. And therefore, there's the idea of flatism. Now, you should not make a value judgment here. You shouldn't say, oh, then this is inferior to height and depth. That's what it's a long habit of not thinking a thing wrong. Uses social appearance of being right. That's why you need to look at it as an issue, the clean slate, without any predispositions, without any preconceived notions, judge it at its value. I would argue that the new generation, all of you, intuitively, are practitioners of breadth. And one should encourage that because in breadth there is great advantage. You're not losing anything. It's just the idea that you're losing something because of height and depth. In breadth comes lateral thinking. In breadth comes, say, Edward de Bono's idea of, lateral thinking, hypertext. When you read these days, what do? You read, there's a word which is different color, you click that, you get more about the word. Then you go, so you're going through realms and realms and realms through the process of operating on a plane of depth, of breadth. Arguably, your knowledge gaining capacity is far more immediate, easy, and accessible. This is what technology does in terms of understanding the medium. And therefore, there will automatically be a new language of communicating all this in literature. That language may be not just the written form, as I said, it could be a combination of different forms. But it's important to keep intact the valuable, unique qualities of the written word. For instance, in the spoken word or in the visual language, you cannot communicate the idea of a metaphor. The metaphor is a peculiar written form, metaphoric use of something. You cannot have a metaphoric visual, for instance, because visuals don't lend themselves to that. The advantage of a written form, for instance, is also its polysemic nature. It's nature whereby you can have multiple meanings, multiple value meanings, not just one meaning. So when I write something, that may mean something to me because it's subjective to me. It may mean something else to the reader. The intended message, as Roland Barthes famously said, is not the received message. In the visual and the heard form, it has to be far more explicit. It is generally far more explicit, although you can bring in elements of metaphoric into that. In painting, it's there already. I mean, Bose is giving a talk on this. Surrealism is there, impressionism is there. There are movements which are peculiar to the plastic arts, the visual arts, the painterly form, and so on and so forth. So, in terms of language, it is still developing. One of the disadvantages for us to deal with this theme is that we are in the thick of it. We don't have the benefit of distance or hindsight in order to say this is what happened. We can talk about the Industrial Revolution with that kind of hindsight. This happened. Whereas we are in the thick of it. We are shaping it as we go along. We are beneficiaries of it. We are victims of it. We are conditioned by it. We are conditioning it. So that is the language that is going to evolve. And what shape that language will take, it's difficult for me to, as I said, definitively indicate, except that it will have these components, because that's the nature of the form. So the writerly and the spoken will interact. There will be, I think, greater emphasis on the idea of the spokenness, because communication is about how well you communicate, right? So if I write, for instance, in a very dense manner, using very, a lot of language flourish and big words and so on, but the person I'm speaking to finds it difficult to understand it, it becomes a problem. Which is why in the written form, what you do, you cannot do in the spoken form, right? Because once I've spoken, it's over. You cannot go back to it. Of course, you can argue that I can record it and rewind and take, but normally you can't. Whereas the written form, you can reread it. You read 2 paras, you can reread it. And with each reading, you might find newer ideas, messages, or depths, or nuances in it. So the writerly form will therefore be a form which also uses the visual and the podcast. So when you read a text, you may be reading and suddenly you find a click, when you click, a visual may come, and then you go down, you click, an audio may come, and you continue reading. That's the multimedia experience of the literature of the novel, is my sense. As against the purely written form, because that has done its time in one sense and plateauing. When you induct these new technologies, this becomes a dynamized, a new kind of experience and literature. So that is the way I think the technology is moving. And that's how the essence of technology is not being technological. Literature and language, of course, are very, very crucial to humankind. Because as Wittgenstein said, the limits of our world are the limits of our language. If you cannot express what you are seeing, then there's no communication, even for your own understanding. Language doesn't mean just expressing. You must have to understand is also a language of understanding. So when you are into a new technology, that, for instance, we are talking about artificial intelligence now. I don't think it's something we should be too worried about, because as it stands, artificial intelligence, being a sentient being, for instance, like us, which can think originally, is a bit far away. What is happening now is it is parsing all that is available. It's permutation and combination of all that is already available out there. That's what artificial intelligence does. And often it can go wrong, but that it might perfect. But it's not going to replace human imagination and thought. It needs prompts by us. What you prompt is what artificial intelligence does, and generative AI does. It will produce a result. You can argue, of course, theoretically, and many people do that when this artificial intelligence has acquired all that is known to us, it can show you new pathways, it can think afresh. But I think it's just to be proved, because the human mind is so naturally innovative and adaptive and elusive to being slaughtered in this or that manner, that it will always stay on top. So those are the technologies that are unfolding before us. Will that kind of technology replace us? It will replace us in the sundry routine activities of life. In a newspaper or in a media practice, for instance, I think an artificial intelligence robot or whatever form it is can take over routine editing, perfect, grammatically perfect language. Can take over routine reporting like sports coverage, what sport, weather reports. What you're not actually doing anything. You're actually going by a barometer which is getting the information and you're just passing it on. Where your mental input, your original mental creative input is nil or very marginal. So human activity in terms of communication, in terms of literature, will automatically be filtered and become more innovative and creative, because the rest of it is already being appropriated, taken over by automation, by robotics, by artificial intelligence. So that's another way that we can see technology influencing, determining the form and language and expression of the future. One other way, I think, it will redefine culture, for instance. Raymond Williams, who's one of the big theorists on culture and society, British, some of you might have read him, he's always said that in the future, culture will become more quotidian, more daily, more everyday life. Our idea of culture is something very grand. So we think something which is very overarching, some person say Kathakali, that's culture. From that, it will move to aspects of our life which have a cultural index in our daily behavior. It will be more quotidian, more everyday life. So there will be cultural expressions in much of what we do. And some of those we can consciously explore and make that the part of your language. So one key aspect in being, shall we say, engaging creatively in a challenging manner in this new emerging media ecology is to develop your, what I would call, voice. That's another interesting term. You know, when you say this is a writer's voice, in fact, even in a novel, the voice of the writer, we see that voice as something, voice is not as spoken form. Voice is the quality, the character of that written form. I think each of you as students must think about developing your distinctive voice in your expression in literature, in communication, and using technology to do that. And that voice will come to you when you are aware of all these parameters that I just mentioned and develop how you want to make your voice. So I want my language for good communication. When you want to communicate with friends, how do you communicate? You want to make sure that she or he understands. It's a close friend, you may even use, shall we say, colloquialisms. You can't say bro and all that, in formal language. So assume that you're speaking to an acquaintance, someone who you don't know well, but you know so, or to a group of 4 or 5 people. How would you express something to them? That would, in my view, be an appropriate language for me. And the more precise you are, the less they have to rewind in their mind and think of what you said. At first shot, first delivery, it goes home. It has a penetrative quality. That comes with developing your voice. Now today in social media, talk about social media influencers. Many of them are good, many of them are bad, some of them are trivial, what they're dealing with is of no importance. But the fact that they're social influencers is because they communicate effectively. They get millions of followers, some of them. I may not agree with some of what they say, but the language they use is very powerful. Or the way they express it is powerful, meaning it's very productive. It serves its purpose. So they have developed their individual voices. We don't have stardom as an idea of the past. As Andy Warhol said, in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. Now it's probably even less. So, although in India probably we still have stars in Tamil cinema, Hindi cinema, even that will pass because there are so many people coming up in the social media who are engaging us and with whom we like to engage because we like what they're saying. Because they develop their voice. So you should develop your voice, literary voice, shall I say, your voice in terms of communication. That will allow you to stay above the run of the mill, above to stay apart from the rest, and be a distinctive persona. The voice will be your personality, your persona. So these are the ways in which technology will enable you. You must not allow technology to determine you. That is a scenario, that's a dystopia, if you like, where the artificial intelligence is dictating to you and you become the servant. The technology is your servant. Technology should serve you. And you therefore need to think innovatively. Otherwise, technology can race ahead because it's got all the information equipment, but it doesn't know what to do with the information unless you prompt it in a particular way. You tap it in a particular way, you dam it in a particular. So these are the ways in which you continue to be the master of your language, develop a distinctive voice which will enable you to be up and above the run of the mill, will enable you to cut through the big clutter of the media world out there, social media included. And it's not an easy task because there are so many people. For the first time in history, everybody is expressing herself or himself because of the mobile phone, right? We are all editors, we are all opinion makers, we all say what we like. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation, fake news. Disinformation is deliberately misleading people. Misinformation may be because you don't know and you're just passing on somebody's message and multiplying the damage. Fake news is again deliberate. So you find all these categories of information and language also out there. You go to a bookshop, most of the books are about how to be a millionaire in 5 seconds, how to be a great book in 20 seconds, how to learn a language in 40 seconds. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but most of the books are that. which I personally think is a waste of time. Books of real quality, which have voice, which have original merit, are decreasing. But when you start contributing to that, to those shelves, I think that is when the change of your writing the technology and making a difference, having a transformative quality in your world. As Darcy Vitachi, who was a famous journalist from this part of the world, Sri Lankan, he said, information without transformation is sheer gossip. If you look around you, much of what we consume is just gossip because it has no transformative quality. So your information, your communication, your literature, your language must have a transformative quality. It may not be a physical transformation sometimes. It makes people think in a new line, in a new manner. It makes them sit up and notice things they haven't noticed before. It may be the inequalities in our society, it may be about why a single person is struggling, or how one person has made such a big success. Those become the narratives. I'll end by saying that in Malayalam, in Kerala, you're uniquely positioned here because some of the new films that you see made by the young directors here, who are not very well known, having casts who are not very important. No stars. I'm not on Mammootty, Mohanlal, Prithviraj and so on. They have ordinary people, the quotidian culture, which Raymond Williams, they are giving you ordinary situations. And that, in my view, is far more valuable even as journalism than formal reportage or accounts or narrations written about it. Because invariably, if you look at particularly, everyone's taking note of this. Bollywood is excited about what's happening in Kerala because they are not able to do it. They got used to this star-studded system. For them to wrench themselves from that is very difficult. But here, it's open-ended. And you find that something which was a small item in a newspaper becomes a movie. Because that's just taken, it's dramatically fictionalized, but then you understand that situation when you see that movie far better than if you read a long article about it. Because it has a formulaic method for writing. It's become so formulaic. So you must shun formulas. Now when you say shun formulas, that becomes a formula, shunning formula. So you'll start by saying Kamala got up at 5 a.m. in the morning, she looked at the sun. But that's also becoming a goal. So you have to constantly innovate the language. And you find these filmmakers are a good, I don't know whether they consciously do it, I don't think so. But they are a good example. They are there, so many of them, so many films. And it's very important because I remember Karl Marx, when he was alive, the most famous economist of his time was Thomas Malthus. There's a Malthusian theory, we won't go into that. He spoke about population growing at a geometrical phase when food production grows at an arithmetical phase. So population always overtake food production, there will be scarcity at one. That's being discredited subsequently because in the globalized world can shift, all these things around. But Malthus was a famous economist of the time. But Marx famously said, to understand contemporary English society, it is better to read Charles Dickens than to read Thomas Malthus. Because Charles Dickens, although he dramatized, gave you a feeling input, gave you a kind of great insight into poverty, into bonded labor of children, how they suffered and so on. Oliver Twist, people like that, characters who said, I want more because you wanted more food and suffered for it. Slavery. So that is how important literature is. There's a transformative quality. And that's how I think we should look at media. So journalism is not a silo which gives you information. Cinema is as I said, provides probably better context as of now. Journalism changes, it might again take the lead. So it must be open-ended, is what open-minded and open-ended about all of this. Be willing to interrogate everything. Don't assume anything for granted. Be alive. To be intellectually alive, you must keep questioning. The mark of, I think, great achievement will be how well you question yourself and what you see and hear and read around you. So these are the few things that I thought I'd share with you. I'm sure you will be able to discuss this and think about it, apply it in your own context, because as I said, you are the better practitioners of this media of the time than my generation is. With this, I'd like to wish the National Conference on this very important subject, in my opinion, all the very best. May you have an enriching day forward, and may you, at the end of it, be a transformed individual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for the words of wisdom. Now, we are moving on to the interactive session. The audience is open to interact with the speaker.
So you said about everyone is becoming a media person with the emergence of smartphones. So in a decade or less, you think that will define a successful journalist?
Can you repeat the question?
You said about everyone is becoming a media person with the emergence of smartphone.
Yeah.
In a decade or less, you think you will define a successful journalist other than technical knowledge?
Absolutely. So I think again you must question the idea of journalism. Journalism implies a journal. So now journalism is a spoken word, it's a written word, it's a cinematic form. So if you have these multimedia skills, you're already a journalist. You must have heard the idea of citizen journalists, right? That's a term that's used because all of us are citizen journalists. How do you know what's happening in Gaza today? There is no journalist there because Israel has banned all journalists from going there. But you know about the killings, you know about women and children dying. 50,000 mark has been crossed long back. Because the people who are there are capturing selfie videos or shooting around them with their smartphones and telling us how they are dying on a daily basis. There's nothing more authentic than that. Right? It's not a question of their interpretation or, there's a building today, it's not there tomorrow. There was a lady alive today, she's not there today. So that's how powerful it is. And this is not, it happened in the Iran-Iraq war also. If you look at the Iraq war, for instance, when American troops invaded, and you'll find Western journalists were allowed there, but most of them would have, you noticed on television, they'll be talking from the top of the terrace of a building. So the top of the five-star hotel they were staying in. And you'll find the top of palm trees behind. That's how you know they're at a height, because it's closed up. So the top of tall palm tree will be behind you, even in the lower. Why do they, almost invariably, this is observation. Then you must ask yourself, why is this man not on the street, not in the hospital, not there, and talking from there, saying, this is what I'm seeing. Because he cannot step there, he'll be blown up. Because the streets were mined, it was dangerous. So they got the information from the local people, from bloggers, from nurses, from students, from workers, from cab drivers. They compile all that and produce a report which CNN and BBC, those are the reports which the rest of the globe understands what happens. So who were the original journalists there? Not the man who's telling you this, but those people who are providing the information. So you're automatically a journalist, in other words. But the moment you use these tools in a sophisticated manner, your journalism moves into a different way. And the moment you use language which can communicate to your listener, to your viewer, your beneficiary, unfortunately the word is consumer. Even in consumerism now, in the digital language, the term is prosumer. Because you're both producing and consuming. You're not just a consumer anymore. I'm producing something with my smartphone, I'm listening to, reading what you have produced. So there's a kind of interaction, it's a cycle that's going on, and it's a kind of connection.
Hi sir, good morning. So I'm Ankita. So my question is not on the topic related to this. So has someone on the earlier film critics, what's your take on the contemporary films?
Yeah, that's true. I started my career as a journalist, as a film critic. I used to write for the Hindu on film festivals. Not just telling the story of a film, but looking at it in some depth, analyzing textual analysis, deep reading of shots and so on. So it was very exciting. And then suddenly the editor of the Hindu one day called me and said, we want to do as a destination correspondent to the Hindu. And I said, I had no experience in political reporting. He said, you can write, you have language, that's enough. I was quite instructive. So I went there and I think I did a very decent job. My take on contemporary film criticism is that one, I'm not sure how objective it is. I'm not saying there's objectivity, all of us are subjective. How objective it is meaning, I'm not sure how much it is a commercial sponsored activity. The problem which the film producers are also complaining about is before a film is released today, you go and sit there and the interval you give a view on the film to dissuade, which dissuades further people from seeing the film. That's because of instant technology. When I was covering film, I didn't have that technology. I couldn't have it. It was, I wrote in the paper, it came the next day. So much of it is, and I understand, I'm not able to say this authoritatively, that you don't get that kind of a bad review. Producers look after you. This call can show you a preview and giving you some money or giving you a package or whatever it is. I'm not saying all film critics are, but there's a lot of that. So you don't know. So you have to actually, I don't think you can, is there a film critic you can go by today? I don't know. In my days there were. There was a music critic, a film critic, a dance critic, who were iconic names. And if they said something that normally is right, and sometimes they say something which is against the grain of the popular, but that will have its own value. The problem now is we are into a populist mode, and everything's a populism. Everything's a rating system. If you go to a bookshop, top 10 books, top 100 books. You go to a music shop, top 10 titles, top 10 labels. Who is determining this? Is it on the basis of sales? It's not on the basis of sales. Somebody is determining this. So is it on the basis of how much resources the publisher of the book can give you? So you must question all this. So this rating syndrome, this ratings mindset, and ratings mindset in a democracy is very dangerous. About 100 years back, the biggest achievements in science and technology came about because you went against the grain of the popular. When the first people said the earth was not flat but round, the whole generation, hundreds of them were burnt at the stake because it was blasphemy to say so. But then you talked about the Copernican revolution, science and so on comes into the picture. So the ratings mindset, the problem is innovative thinking will always be resisted initially. But if you persist, that becomes your voice, that becomes your voice. Was that the answer to your question?
Sir, is there any advice you would like to give to the students who are interested in pursuing journalism as their future PG course?
I think it's an exciting time to be a journalist, but not an exciting time to be a journalist as I was a journalist in my time, because that whole framework has changed. The whole assumptions have changed. You have to be multimedia skilled. So my advice is, which you are already, you're using the smartphone intelligently. Examine whether you're using your smartphone intelligently, using all the technical facets of it, and try and use it more purposefully. I mean, there's no point sitting in a class and texting your friend who's four seats away because you can't speak with the thrown out of class, saying what are both these lectures, then we let's stop. Or those kind of trivia. Or on your Facebook, you write, I just got up, I had coffee, what are you doing? I had tea. The amount of time I'm even including my children spend on it is it's astonishing with this trivia. So use it intelligently, use facets, technological facets of an instrument that you have ready access to. It's affordable. The mobile revolution in India is perhaps a global first because the kind of reach it has. Anybody now, street vendor, street sweeper in the corporation, they all have mobile phones, right? So That is and how do you use it more effectively? So you know that they all have. So what you say is accessible to all of them, potential. But are you able to give a message that they are interested in order to listen to? So you have a ready audience in one sense, but it's such an anonymized, huge abstract audience that you need to create a following out of that. You need to create a readership or viewership or listenership out of that. And that's where your voice, distinctive voice, becomes very important. So distinctive voice again and again is the advice. Actually, can you use this one? I can stand there.
Sir, what inspired you to create one of India's first private news channels, and how did storytelling play a role in its success?
Thank you. That you're asking me for my autobiography. That's a take a long time. But anyway, I'll put it in a few sentences. I was in Bahrain as the West Asia correspondent of the Hindu in the mid-1980s. The mid-1980s was a time when one technological change, big shift took place. What's called the arrival of DBS technology, direct broadcast satellite technology. In other words, you could have a satellite up in the sky, and the footprint of the satellite, you can get signals. So if you have a transponder on that satellite, you can, have the footprint of it's like shining a torch. Wherever the torch light is there, people are able to listen to, see. And that was accessible. The government in India had no rule. We are guided by the 1885 Indian Telegraph Act, which said only the state can uplink signals from Indian soil. But it was silent about receiving signals. So technically, I could go to Sri Lanka and uplink a signal, and people could receive it. So I'm not violating the law. People who are watching it is not violating the law. So that's what direct broadcast satellite enabled. So I read about Ted Turner. In fact, my inspiration was Ted Turner, who's the founder of CNN. So he had actually done this in Atlanta, in the USA. And he had done this, both the things that I did, which is to have a satellite channel and to have cable network. So he used telephone poles in Atlanta to wire the cables. Initially it was copper coaxial cables. After now it's all optic fiber cables. It's far greater capacity. But he did that. So when I came back from Bahrain, by then things were happening in television here, because I shifted from television to the printed word. I came back, this was in the back of my mind. So I joined PTI. I set up the television wing of PTI, Press Trust of India, which is a premium news agency in India. And I set up the studio, the television studio of PTI. It's called PTI TV. And we were doing a lot of productions, as was mentioned in the introduction, global trends, Soviet Union, Berlin Wall, Afghanistan, Russians in Afghanistan, Sri Lanka War, etc., etc. Mainly foreign programs. So at that time, I proposed this to PTI board. I said, you are uniquely placed to start a television channel, private television, other than the state. Doordarshan was state. And the board some of the people in the board were very welcoming, some others did, because they had conflict of interest. PTI is owned by the press owners, newspaper owners. Some of them had their own individual ambitions to start like Times of India, and they have started for Hindustan Times and others. So when it dragged on, I told my boss, the general manager, that I want to do this. He was very simple. He said, Sashi, this is not going to happen here. You better do it on your own. Which is why it was called Asian Network. Otherwise, for something that starts in Kerala, it was a bit ambitious to call it Asia, right? My idea was it would be an offering from India, which would be the equivalent of a BBC offering from England or a CNN offering from USA, which will have a global impact, and certainly an India focused, all India focused. So that is how I went to Kerala. So I could not then do it at all India level because I didn't have the resources. I had tremendous ideas and ambition without a pocket to match. I mean, I had no money to see it through. So I had to come to Kerala, and at that time, Karunakaran was the Chief Minister of Kerala, and I pitched the idea to him. He instantly saw value. I must say that he is the person who enabled. He said, this is wonderful. I said, what should we do as a government? I said, all I want is a right of way. In other words, give me the right to use electricity poles in the entire state so that I can string up the cable network. Because here telephone code is, that term we use telephone code, because in the US every home has telephone. Here every home didn't have a telephone, and now of course mobile phone is there. So I needed electricity code. And so I got that. I got that after a lot of discussion with the people there and the electricity department and all that, for a fairly simple sum of 1 rupee per pole per year. Through the entire state of Kerala, I had a KCB agreement for 10 years. I used that agreement and went around and found investors for my project. Because they knew this was promising. Before that, I went and met the same people, they wouldn't give me a fight. But after that, in fact, I had a lot of investors. So that is how AsiaNet came about. And that's why it's called AsiaNet, and that's how it came about in India, in Kerala.
One sec. I hope I'm not speaking out of line. I just want to say thank you for what you said. It was very interesting, and I had a lot of points that I wanted to ask you about, but I'm going to hopefully short down to just one question in two parts, basically. What you talked about with artificial intelligence, you said that it was passing all of the current available information, and that it would never take over human imagination because it required prompts, like making it like the, I guess, baseline fail-safe, preventing it from having its own sentience. I just want to ask you if it ever happened, past that fail-safe, if it managed to get that sentience, would it cause you pause? Like, would it be something that you would against? Would it be something that you would be willing to speak out against and stop from happening? And whether something as idealistic as adding creativity in like mundane fields, like something you expressed, AI will take over, like weather forecast and sports news, if there was more creativity encouraged in those fields, if that would help against these fields being taken over by something that's accompanying.
Yeah, the first part, certainly I think we have caused a great concern. If AI is outpaced our creativity, our genius, our innovativeness, and started dictating to us. Because I don't want to call an AI sir, good morning sir, and so on. So that's what will be reduced to. But I don't think that's going to happen because human, shall we say, mind, human innovativeness, adaptability, cleverness, acumen, these are all not installed through, they come with practice for the AI, but you will find newer ways of, survival, newer ways of tackling situations. So I don't think that will happen. And the second part of the question was, what was the second one?
So adding like creativity, encouraging creativity.
Yeah. So even in the routinized, I think you can do that. But why do you want to do that? The idea is liberate yourself to do more important things. Now, my watching a cricket match and conveying that, nowadays you don't need because they live telecast. There was a time in the stadium when the cricket match was being played, when I was in college and even later, people will also be listening to transistor radio while they're watching the match. All of it, because transistorization had just come in and everyone had a transistor radio. So I used to think, why are they watching this? Because they're seeing it. Because they still want to hear Aliar Khan. Because he was a very famous radio. His voice was this. They want to see what he's saying about what I'm saying. So if you develop a voice of that nature, you can continue to be in sports. You can continue to be a sports commentator or covering sports, which AI cannot imitate because AI doesn't have your voice. Right? So your voice is what will make you distinctive. But on the other way to look at it is, you can let sports be covered by AI, let routine editing, sub-desk, what the desk does, be covered. Because already there are, a lot of apps which do that, right? Which correct your grammar, auto correction of your spelling, all that is already there. So AI can be an additionality of that. You then divert your attention to more substantive things. You want to talk about, the skill sets of a cricketer, what are the aspects of it that is developing, more nuanced, and then your voice becomes distinctive. You are able to say something which everybody else is not saying. Today, what's the problem? Standardization of industrial era is there in the information era. If you look at television channels, everyone has the same headlines, one after the other, the same order. It's almost as if, like 10 commandments, 1, 2, 3, 4, these are 10 headlines of the day, as if it's, why does that happen? Because you are not thinking independently, you're not innovating. And therefore, none of these channels is making money because they're all saying the same thing. They all have the same guess. They have Same case, sometimes it parallelly into 3 channels and call it live, which is a live because it can't be live in 5 places. Because all be recorded and they're using it at that time. So all these are going to be out very, very soon. Because you use innovativeness and create newer forms. If I have a channel, if I'm doing a channel today, I won't have headlines which the rest of the channels have. And I think it'll still make a big impact. It'll probably make a better impact. But I don't know why they don't do that because it's kind of herd mentality. It's also the mentality of the danger of missing a story. Because when an editor takes a meeting and he says, we missed the story, what does he mean? He means not that there were things happening in the world which we missed. Because there are a million things happening in the world. None of us can cover all of that. What he simply means when he says we missed a story is our channel or our newspaper, whoever you speak to the better, missed a story, did not cover a story which another channel or another newspaper had. Therefore, we missed the story. The implication for the journalist is if I don't want to miss a story, I must do what the other man is also doing. So there's a press club syndrome operating. There are press clubs, as you know, but the press club syndrome, the press club's mentality, that you actually compare notes with others. But the headline and sometimes, unless it's an exclusive story, you normally tell the others what it is. So everyone gets the same headlines in the same order. Have you ever wondered why is that all the people talk about 4, 5, 6, 2? So that's the way to interrogate it. Don't take anything for granted, as I said. Interrogate ab initio, question it and ask why is the system like this? And if all of them are suffering because of it, they're not making money because you're giving more and more of the same. People don't want more and more of the same from different channels. They want different things. So these are the ways in which to use AI to advantage. You prompt the AI to say, I want a bulletin which is very different from all the other channels, and see what it says. And then see whether you can work on it. Keep prompting. But you are the engineer. That is the engineering. Okay?
So,
Right.
Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite our beloved Associate Director, Reverend Father Ajish Purshare, CMI, to present a collection of book as memento to our esteemed chief guest, Sri Shashi Kumar, sir. Sir. So we request you to accept this token as our sincere appreciation. Thank you, Father. Thank you, sir. And now invite Asna from the Department of English to share a word of gratitude.
On behalf of the Department of English, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to Sri Shashi Kumar sir for gracing us with his presence and sharing his invaluable insights. Your words have left a lasting impression and will undoubtedly inspire us in our future endeavors. We also extend our sincere thanks to the Associate Director and the management for their unwavering support and guidance that made this session possible. Thank you.
Your attention, please. With that, we have come to the end of first session. All participants are invited to join us for a tea break. Refreshments have been arranged in room number 101 on the first floor. We request everyone to reassemble by 11:25 a.m. to continue with the event. Thank you.
അന്നേരം വേറെ ഇതാ വരുന്നത്. വേറെ ലിങ്ക് ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യണം. വേറെ ലിങ്ക് ക്രിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യണം. സാറിന് ചോദിച്ചതിനോട് പുതിയ ലിങ്ക് പറയുന്നത് അതെ.